This is Smoking Out the Closet. Now, here are your hosts, Alex and Rayven Greer.
Hi everyone, my name is Rayven and I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Alex and I use they, them pronouns.
And welcome back to another episode of
Smoking Out the Closet.
How you doing, everybody?
We have a very special episode for everybody today.
So we're actually sober right now because this is recorded after the fact of us having our first guest appearance on the show. I'm really excited for it and I really hope you guys enjoy it. Alex was geeking out the entire time.
I'm still just sitting here smiling like an idiot thinking about this. We had an interview with the writer of Heinous Investigations, Jessica Castro.
And so, without further ado, we'll put you guys to that interview, and happy Halloweed!
Happy Halloweed!
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special first for Smoking Out of the Closet. We have a guest on our show.
Hello!
So, for our listeners, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I am Jessica Castro, and I am the creator, producer, writer, and many, many other things for the podcast Heinous Investigations. I usually joke around whenever we're in my podcast group, Wadley Productions, is in a meta space. I'm always like, I wrote the thing. That's usually what I say. So, yeah. Hi.
So, Alex is sitting over here right now, just giddy, just bouncing in their seats.
I'm geeking out. I've been so excited to talk to you ever since, Rayven brought this up.
Oh, yay. I'm glad you're excited. I am also excited.
So I guess for our listeners who may not know, could you describe what Heinous Investigations is, like your podcast?
Sure. It is an audio drama serial podcast. We have a certain number of story arcs we put out. This is our first season that we're in right now. It's going to have, as of right now, I think we're in the middle of our story arcs, kind of, but it's going to have 8, and we spread it out across our episodes. Every few episodes is a different supernatural kind of storyline, because our podcast is basically, I usually put it under the realm of, I think, horror/supernatural comedy. In a lot of ways, it's kind of a mesh of a bunch of things where the story focuses on a supernatural investigation agency in like this small New England coastal town. But this group of people, they're very, very dysfunctional, I guess, and are very bad at their jobs, yet it somehow works. So it's just kind of their adventures, tracking down all kinds of supernatural dangers in their town, dealing with it, and also dealing with each other along the way. And I have so much fun doing it with my lovely group of actors and editors over at Wadley Productions. I voice a couple of characters on there myself too, which is also super fun. Yeah. Anything else, I guess? I think that's a pretty good description, honestly. We can get into more details of characters and stuff if you guys want, because I am here and I can answer questions.
The first thing that pops into my head whenever you were describing your podcast, it's kind of like those of you who watch Supernatural. It's like if Supernatural is just the larger group of just thrown together people who are just like, we're going to make this work. We're going to figure this out as we go along.
That is very true. I admit I did watch... I am a huge fan of those Monster of the Week type shows, like Supernatural, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I was definitely a Doctor Who kid in college. I mean, not college, sorry, in high school.
Much respect.
A little less one. Yeah, mainly David Tennant. Major respect to David Tennant.
Yes.
Shout out to David Tennant.
Yes.
But yeah, I was especially in love with those. Yeah, the Russell T Davies era of Doctor Who, and yeah, a lot of those types of things. But I also really have a passion for like animation and voice work in that kind of setting. So I also watched a lot of like very cartoony stuff as a kid. I remember staying with my grandparents at like a very young age and watching way too much Scooby-Doo, which I think also very much impacted me. and I get like Heinous Investigations gets compared to Scooby-Doo probably more than a lot of other things. which I am very proud of.
Well,
yeah.
oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, that took care of my first question because I was going to ask what inspired you to create Heinous Investigations.
Well, yeah, I'd say that's a big stuff. I wanted to do kind of like this mashup of Monster of the Week and like very cartoony type stuff. I have a bunch of other cartoons that really influenced me growing up. Beyond that, anything that's like very like hokey, gimmicky, tropey type storylines and humor was what really, I think, fueled me to write it. I was like, we need something like this in the podcast sphere. There are things that are like it, but nothing exactly like it. And I was like, this is my chance to put something out there. So
yeah, even in the realm of like supernatural podcasts, that's what I kind of call them. You have like the meta dramas that are like, oh my gosh, this is based on a true story. Like No Sleep podcast comes to mind. I listen to them a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have like very slim of that fantasy kind of old radio show style. Like you have Welcome to Night Vale. And then I feel like your podcast over there is kind of like one of those, radio dramas. And you don't have a lot of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. That's another point of inspiration for me. I do like, my grandfather got me into a lot of old movies and old radio and even like some very highbrow stuff for a 5-year-old, like opera and things like that. I was very much into all of that stuff with my grandpa. I really liked, what is it? I started like really getting into it later on. If you look into like The Shadow, like really old, like 1940s and 50s type, like super spooky, but not really spooky, but super mysterious audio drama. I'm like, okay, let's take this and make it goofy. So yeah. Definitely another point of inspiration there. It was also fun. I had a bunch of characters that I had come up with in my head, and I was like, I'm gonna just throw them all together in this crazy classic audio drama space.
So you work with a lot of different voice actors. I think on the podcast's big page is 12 voice actors in general.
Yes. Yeah, there's about a dozen of us. Yep.
Now, have they given ideas to like the characters they play as part of the writing process or anything?
I had all the scripts written actually before I casted anyone. Some of the cast, and by some I mean one of the cast, I had known because we had gone to college and actually performed in some live theater together. And he is a very talented character actor. He voices Carlton in the show. So yeah, he and I have kind of gone back a while. So I got to know him pretty well beforehand. So I was kind of like, I had him still read lines though, and I was like, yes, okay, amazing. He's gonna be like my rock here. And then he definitely brought a lot of his own to the character. His character was really hard to come up with. We ended up going into like, it took a while to like really, it was a lot of him like playing around in the microphone. I mean, being like, hey, tweak it like this or that or the other thing. I can get into a little bit more of how our process when we put the episodes together is later, but I remember he definitely, like, all the input on characters came after I wrote the scripts. It was more like how the actors performed it, I guess, is where I'm going. There are certain things that I gave and then they just took it and ran with it. Like I remember another character that was definitely interesting to do was we have a DG Holstein who is incredible. He actually voices both Orville and Frank, and I gave him like kind of loose ideas of what I wanted those two very different characters to be, and once again he just took it and ran with it. I think, for example, I said for Orville, who is like, for anybody who hasn't listened to the podcast yet, he talks in like this very, very monotone, a very blunt voice, which DG does amazing. I just said to him, I'm like, okay, imagine that this guy's brain is a typewriter and like everything he says, his brain is typing as he like says it. And that's like the direction that I gave him. And from there, he just took it and ran with it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been great. And it's fun for him too, because there's a lot of times he'll ask me, he'll be like, you wrote that Orville is supposed to laugh. And I'm like, oh yeah, have fun with that. I do write, like I write stuff out in the script, like kind of what I expect people to do, either in like a little stage direction format or like in the actual, like in the words. Like again, for example, for an Orville laugh, I just write H-E-H, heh. And then I'm like, go ahead, do what you want with that. So yeah, it's definitely all of the character shaping stuff comes in with the performance for sure. And like things I didn't even think of for some things. And like that's honestly the best part, seeing like I had ideas for all these characters, but the voice actors are just so amazing and like bringing them to life and doing things in ways that I did not expect. Yeah.
So we've started talking on Reddit, and I saw a big thing that you had on the post was about inclusion.
Oh yes.
Could you talk a little about that, like how you're working with the podcasts that have representation and inclusion for different people?
Yes, absolutely. I when I put out auditions, for these characters, I put it out on a site that's very often used to scout for, look for voice acting talent, either for free or paid projects. And I was very explicit with the kinds of people I wanted to audition for many of the roles in terms of it was kind of a combination of being very explicit with things and also being very open, in the sense that for things like there's one character, Miriam, who I was like, I want an actress of color, specifically, or an actor of color actually. I was very that's one thing I can bring up with the gender stuff in a sec, but I was like, yes, I want that voice out there, because even though this is a podcast and everybody you kind of wonder, like, how can you be diverse if no one is seeing you? Because everybody associates diversity with what you can see. And I think that that's something that's very, like, it's an extreme oversimplification for like how unique a person is. So I was like, I want that voice and those experiences. And Elena is absolutely amazing, because I think I always kind of pictured Miriam as Hispanic, me being a multi-ethnic Hispanic person myself. I was like, yes, I want that voice in there for sure. And then I also, again, going from my perspective, I wanted a lot of again, me being multi-ethnic, I also wanted a lot of diverse voices in that sense. So some of the characters are written as multiracial or multi-ethnic and are voiced by those kinds of actors. Algie, for example, and Jack are, and I know Tuan, who voices Algie, is incredible, and also very like, again, going in the cultural diversity front, he's brought a lot of really interesting perspectives on the character, which is cool. And we've gotten a lot of that in terms of in terms of race and ethnicity and that kind of experience. But then my favorite part of the podcast, honestly, is in association with, I think, gender and mental health, which both impact me very much. As well, I mean, I said as well as my ethnicity, but I for a lot of the characters, I explicitly wrote any ethnicity, not ethnicity, sorry, any gender can read for these roles, whether they are written as male or female or non-binary characters. I was like, just read. I care more about your performance and how I feel like if that is truly the character's voice than who you are. And I've gotten some really amazing people. Sorry, I think my dog's barking in the background. Sorry about that. I got some really amazing really amazing actors out of that too. I'm trying to think of a good way to put it. The best way I can put it is when some of these actors even came on, whether they were doing a small bit role or they had one of the larger roles in our main cast, they're like, is it okay if I voice this character? For example, Sarah, who's someone who comes in for us to voice a lot of our villainous characters. She is, I was like, can you voice this man in a few episodes? And she's like, are you sure about that? And I'm like, yeah, how do you know what a man sounds like? A man can sound like a lot of things.
Yeah.
It doesn't really, I think that's something that people don't realize. Like, again, everybody's really thinking about focusing on like the aesthetics and looks of everything, but voices are really, really important, both metaphorically and very much physically. So I think there's been a lot of fun with that, playing around with, people who associate as he voicing she's and vice versa. And we've got one of my like favorite people who just jumped in on the project for the last few episodes and they'll be showing up more in the next season is another friend of mine, Megan, and they bring in like this adorable voice for like this cute little boy in a few episodes. And it just is completely mind-blowing to have both that wide spectrum of identities behind the scenes and also giving voices to characters who have diverse identities as well, both gender and sexuality wise. I remember how pumped Elena was when I told her, I'm like, I remember it was actually, I'll say really quick, we were having this big thing where they're like, so what's everybody's sexualities? And I'm like, oh, it's like, you want to know? I can tell you, I have that written down. And I remember Helena being so excited. I was like, Miriam's bi, right? And she's like, me too. And I'm like, wow, great. Like, yes, represent. So it's been, we did a whole thing back during Pride Month on our Instagram and some other social media where everybody drew art of theirs and other characters specifically for Pride. And that was absolutely incredible to just see that from us as a group and then getting some positive feedback from it, which was great. And like on that note, for myself personally, I think I also like this idea of anybody can voice anybody. For me, I think it started, if I can get like personal about myself, I think it started a lot when I was a kid. I've been a theater nerd for a very long time, but what really impacted me was I was in middle school, probably about 13, I think. And I saw a local production of Little Shop of Horrors, which is still my favorite musical. And I remember watching the show, and I don't know how much you know about the show, but there's a typical male, female, like hetero romance where it's Seymour and Audrey. And I'm like, oh, they're adorable. And I remember coming out of there and being like, like singing the songs to the show. And I think in my head, I was like, I feel like, everything in my life up to this point has told me I should want to play Audrey, but I really want to be Seymour, like so bad. I was like, that's so unfair. Like, why do the cis men get to have like all the fun with these parts? So I remember that fueling me so much. And I also remember getting frustrated because in a lot of school readings, like when you have to read plays and things in school, at least I did in high school, I kept getting cast as guys. And I remember being mad about that actually. And I think it was a little bit of like a denial thing where I was like, no, I'm a girl. I shouldn't be reading these things. Why do I keep getting stuck with these parts? But then as I've grown more, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's like, these parts are so cool. I'm like, why do the cis men get to have all the fun? I want in on this. And now I am currently voicing a whole mess of dudes. So it's definitely, for me, it's important both like on that level of a lot of the voice actors we have are so diverse, but to also have those characters that can be diverse too. In the fact that like one of the characters I voice is Elliot, who's like the medic of the group, and he kind of isn't even human. So it, it's like, hey, I want to voice that.
Yeah, because who's to say what a supernatural being's voice would sound like?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's more about the personality and the characteristics that matter. And I think I'm gonna stop rambling now, but that's my very long ramble about inclusion and diversity.
No, it's amazing to hear all these things you have going on behind the scenes over there and how you like went to these reaches to find these specific people for these specific characters. It's great.
Oh yeah, no, it's really important to have, and you're especially when you're doing an independent project, you're kind of, I don't want to say pigeonholed, but you're stuck in a way of the pool of people you can get. You have those people who are looking for paid gigs and strictly paid gigs, and how do you even find voice actors who are willing to do independent work in the first place? And I had to do some digging around, but even with all that said, I really found some really amazing people who were a really good voice talent who are willing to try all kinds of different things for all kinds of different characters. Yeah.
And definitely got a real good crew. I've been seeing some like the videos on like TikTok and everything, and
I still need to find you guys' TikTok. I've heard of this, and I've yet to find it.
I believe I think we are just straight up Wildly Productions in that one. We could be Wildly_Productions. I may be getting that. I know Wildly_Productions is our Instagram. There's so many of them, but it's always some variation of Wildly Productions or Wildly_Productions. I could probably honestly find out in 2 seconds if I just pull out my phone and take out TikTok. Give me a sec. I know how technology works. We are Wildly_Productions. Haha.
Haha.
Got it. Yes. Wildly_Productions. Yes, on TikTok. We did a bunch of promotional videos. It didn't get that much traction, but it was still so much fun. We just all got we're sitting down on a massive Zoom call and we're like, okay, let's go. We'll just bounce the lines off each other. We'll edit it all in post. The video quality won't be that great, but it'll be fine. So yeah, that was definitely a fun time. And that's if I can just say one more thing about that, like on that note, that's something that was also kind of different with this podcast. I learned as I was developing this show that a lot of podcasts is like you pick your voice actors, you send out your scripts, they read the lines, they do a couple takes, and they and they send it back to you. You tell them if you liked it or if you don't. And I'm like, there's really no room to play around with that, in my opinion. So we always get on, whenever I have a new script for a new episode, we would get on and do a massive Zoom call where we'd all read together and we would just see what worked. And I remember someone really early who was on the project really, really early in its production, who is no longer with the project because they basically said, this is not how a podcast is done. This is wrong. This is never going to work. And basically just quit out of anger of how I ran things. And now I'm like, haha, look who's laughing now. Yeah, but I think that's the whole, it's like you can't, no field ever got advanced by just saying this is the way things are done. No one can do it different. Nothing ever improves if you don't try something new. So I was like, no, this is going to be completely different. So
it definitely works. It's very kind of the way it sounds like you guys do it. It sounds like a table read when they do for voice acting with animation.
Oh yeah.
But you still get that feel from it. It still feels very authentic when I listen to it. I'm completely caught up and I'm just sitting there waiting for the next episode. When's it coming out?
I've been slowly trying to catch up because I have this weird thing anxiety about books or TV shows or things I really like. It's if I'm getting close to the end, I don't want to finish it because then I'm gonna have to wait.
Oh yeah, I know. And we have a really, because it really is still a pretty small operation. We may have a bunch of voice talent, but we've only got 2 editors for many, many episodes that we're constantly in production. I should have finished all of these episodes and then just released them one after the other, but we're in a constant state of still working on episodes as of right now. So that's why they're so spread out, basically. But funny enough, it ended up working out because we will actually be putting out our season finale, I believe, the week that's exactly 1 year from when we put out the first episode. So
that's cool.
There we go. Poetic. Yeah. So I don't know. Sorry, I guess I'm just what else do I say now? Do you have any specific questions about maybe the story or the characters or the voices or anything? I know that my other voice actors aren't here, but I could try to give you my best assumption of what they would talk about. Cause I know we have on our YouTube channel, we've got our little side thing that we do when new episodes come out that aren't very widely viewed, but we still do them. I don't know if you guys have seen those. I think so, but I'm not sure.
And I've listened to the premiere party. I listened to you guys on Spotify, and I've listened to the premiere party. And at first, I was at work doing prep in the morning, and I was like, like, what is this? And I was like, no. I'm just gonna write it out. I'm gonna listen to this whole episode. I'm so glad I did, because you guys get along so well. Like, that's what I love about that. It's not like, oh, hey, we're just coworkers. We do this in the office, then we go home with our lives. You guys are like, yeah, we do have other lives, but like we totally love hanging out with each other too. Like, it's amazing.
We are like the most ridiculous, slightly codependent group of people. Yeah, no, well, I think that was the other part of the table read that I really like, that whole table read aspect. That, I mean, we do actually go back to after we do everything, we record our table reads, and then we go back and we record based on what we record our lines based on what we did in the table read. But I'm sorry, I was going somewhere with this. Yeah, what I was gonna say is, I really, with that table read idea, it's like, how else, I really wanted there to be like a chemistry like between characters, but also I wanted there to be a good vibe within the group. So yeah, that being said, yeah, we do these sites. If you want to go check out our YouTube channel, is also Wildly Productions, and it's Wild, like, think the last name of the playwright Oscar Wilde and then LY, because Oscar Wilde, also big influence for me.
You should see Rayven's face right now. There was a light bulb moment in her head.
Oh yeah, because Jack and Arjun
and Algernon, yeah. Algernon, yeah. Well, in the first episode, yeah, big shout out to Oscar Wilde in the first episode.
And I can't believe I didn't make that connection then.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, no, like, I loved writing that scene too, because I've had that like experience, I think, with other people, where it's like Jack's explaining like, yeah, my parents are big fans of Oscar Wilde, and that's why we're named that. And then it's with him with Carlton, and Carlton's like, yeah, you lost me at Oscar Wilde or whatever. I was like, yeah, that's accurate. But yeah, so I'm sorry, circling back to all that. Yeah, so we have some more of those, like, if you liked the premiere party, we goof around like every time a new episode comes out. A bunch of us, not all of us, like in the premiere group where it was massive, but a bunch of us, so it usually is on some kind of rotation. We have like some pretty like typical players. Usually I'm there, usually DG, who we call Dio, is there, and which is great. It's like, it started as a convenient way for he was like trying out a nickname, and now we kept it for the meme pretty much. Anyway, back to what I was saying. Yeah, there's like some pretty, like, I'm usually there and so on. But yeah, if you liked that, we have this thing called Wildly Abandoned, is what we officially called it, on the Wildly Productions YouTube channel. So yeah, that's where we talk about a lot of that character stuff. But if you had any questions about like what's going on in the show, I wouldn't mind like spoiling what's happened so far, or what I can, if you're interested.
Would, but I don't want to give spoilers for our listeners who might be going to start watching the show.
That is totally fair. Yeah, that's totally fair.
Whoever's listening, go over on whatever platform you're listening to us on and just click that search bar, put us down in the bottom. I think I've done this before whenever I shouted you guys out before in our last episode. I know that we can play on the bottom of your phone screen, computer screen, whatever. Just go search Wildly, Heinous Investigations or Wildly Productions, and go find them and listen to them. They're amazing.
Yes, thank you. And it's so good to hear that, honestly. Every time that more and more people listen to us, or we get people like you who are really into like Heinous Investigations and following it, everyone just gets so pumped. You got a Discord chat, and we're all going off on the Discord chat like, do you see how many people listened this week? Yeah, we're all dorks.
So I was wondering, do you have like a favorite character you voice or write?
Yeah, I could probably say. Honestly, I love all the characters that I voice. Which is funny because it's stressful for me to record their lines, because I wasn't even sure if I was going to voice any characters when I wrote this story, but just casting became so crazy. I was like, you know what? I love acting and voice work. I'm going to take a swing at this and pick up these two characters. One, Martin doesn't talk that much. It's fine. And I later on was like, oh my gosh, these guys both talk at like 1,000,000 miles an hour. I'm dying. Oh God, what did I do? Because there are some characters that really motor mouth. I would say, like, we've talked about it in our group too. Like, the top 4 contenders for motor mouthing are Elliot, Martin, Ginny, and Frank. We've all agreed those are like murder.
I can just see you guys you folks sitting at your mic, and there's just a gallon of water beside you. You're just like, hold on.
Oh yeah,
I gotta get a drink before the next take.
That is correct. I have a humidifier going. I'm like, let's do this. But yeah, I do love my boys. I call them my boys. I love voicing them very much, and it has become such like a science to do them that they're like all different parts of me, I guess, in a way, or what I kind of want to be. Like Martin, yes, he has a ton of money, which I'm sure helps him tremendously. But he's on top of his, like, I don't know how much swearing we're allowed to do right now. Is that good? Are we
we curse like every 3 words?
Okay. I was gonna say, okay, because I'm gonna say Martin is like on top of his shit. He is like the level of on top of his shit that I want to be. For sure. And I really like doing that. Plus I really like, he's got the like that transatlantic thing going on, that's part of the reason why I actually jumped on with that character, because it's a voice that I started doing as a joke with David, who plays Carlton. Like I would do that voice as a joke for him and another friend of ours back when we were in doing plays together in college. So I would just be like, let me see if I can do it. You get out in the front of your nose and you just say, yeah, I'm like a 1940s radio announcer. What do you want me to do? Like, and that's always fun. And then it's really cool because then it's basically like I have it all in the front of my face. And then if I bring it up here a little bit and, add some and then you kind of get Elliot, and it's very nervous and constantly. That's like, for me, that's that's my anxiety. I was diagnosed with like just chronic anxiety at a very, very young age, younger than most people get diagnosed. So I think for me, Elliot was like the manifestation of my anxiety. And it was I also note in like one of these Wildly Abandoned that I really wanted a character with a verbal tick, because I have a lot of those myself, or just ticks in general. I have a lot of because of my anxiety. So I was like, he's just going to say in like almost every sentence. It'll be fine. So that's always, if I need to get into character for him, I just go for a bunch. And then I don't know how far anyone else is into the show, but there's another character that I do in relation to Elliot. I won't give too much away on that because it kind of comes a few episodes in. But for that one, I tell people it started out as a Frank Sinatra impression, and then where I was like singing Fly Me to the Moon and like this very like back of my throat type voice. And then I just threw in like a crazy accent. And then I was like, there we go. So yeah, I love, you can tell I just get so excited about doing all of the like vocal acrobatics with those voices and like getting to show like different parts of myself. And then for characters that I write, I honestly love writing a lot of them, but for me, I really love, and DG will be so happy to hear me say this, but I really love Orville and Frank. Because they're so different, and writing them is so different, because Frank is like the meta guy. From the second you meet him, it's like completely over the top, but also just the most aware of what's going on, and the fact that in the context that this is a radio show. And him just being like the super aware pop culture guy. I just love, he's like where I get in most of like my funny little pop culture jabs in this show. Yeah. So yeah, I really love that. And I just love how DG does it. I just love it. And then that one was a hard one to cast. That was one of the last roles I cast because nobody could get it exactly right. And I remember DG coming the closest. And then once I cleared it up, it was like, boom, immediately. He's like, I'm going to do Todd Habercorn does Beetlejuice. And I'm like, sure. I'm like, and I remember being like, okay, less Beetlejuice, more Todd, go. Yeah, so like that's literally how it started. And yeah, so writing his stuff is really fun. And then Orville is the complete opposite end of the spectrum, where most of his lines are like one word to one sentence, like one short sentence. But you have to get so much sass into those one words or one sentences.
We'll say Orville's probably my favorite character on the podcast.
He is a favorite. And he's honestly, I love him so much. And he's a character that I have not, like, even when this first season is over, we will not have even scratched the surface on this boy.
And see, where Frank's my favorite
This dark
character.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know. Oh my gosh. DG rubs it in our faces all the time. I'll always be like, guess who? I'll just be like, it's also almost like a joke now. It's like, guess who? Guess what? Frank is someone else's favorite character, or Orville is someone else's favorite character, and DG's just like, hey. It's like, please leave. I think Frank and Orville are the only ones who currently have fan art of them as well, which I think is really funny.
Currently, but I'm actually working on some right now.
Hooray! Good. We love fan work. We gotta. I don't know if you. Again, we have a Twitter. We got a really great like YouTube poop style edit of our voices on Twitter. That is just, they took a scene of me, Frank and Elliot, so it was me and DG, Frank and Elliot talking, and turned it into like them talking about butts for like a straight minute. And it's kind of great. Yeah, I'm sure if you dig around on, yeah, that one's Wildly Product 1 on Twitter. If you dig around on that, you will definitely find it. Because I think a bunch of us retweeted it. But yes, fan works. We get so hyped with that. I will say, if we're talking about fan favorites, another one that actually gets a lot of love is Jenny. Just shout out to Maria.
Yeah,
who,
I can see that.
Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna put like this like anime Genki girl in this like world that she has no business being in. I'm like, but she's also gonna be a vampire. And I'm like, yeah, that works. I feel it. The whole thing is complete and utter nonsense. No character really makes sense. Honestly. So in a way, they're all kind of fun to write. But, you know, the ones who really go, like, really walk the line of, like, completely and totally, like, all over the place, those are the best ones for me. I mean, some other ones it's so hard. I love them all in my own way. They're, like, you know, it's kind of weird. Like, your characters are, like, your children. You know, my very, very dysfunctional children.
I get that.
Yeah.
I work on I have a webcomic and I'm trying to get published as a graphic novelist.
Ooh.
And so I have all these characters that I designed, and that's one thing what I really liked about and wanted to get this interview was because like with my comics, I make a lot of representation for stuff that I never got for myself or for the people that are close to me.
Yeah, for sure.
That I needed back then. So a lot of my main characters end up trans women. I have a couple non-binary characters that some of them I base even off my wife.
Hey.
So I really love that, like how this is an inclusive project, and like when I saw that I was like, yes, someone else. First guest, let's go.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Like I said, you've got like everything, and there are even some characters who, again, there's like some characters who have just shown up. We've got I don't want to spoil for anybody, but we've got some characters who come in later who, yeah, we've got some amazing days who show up, or I think we have, it's very interesting. I again using Elliot as an example, you know, Elliot's, you know, I even like make a joke about it or something. Like I get into like this whole like angel mythos. I'm not gonna spoil too much. But this to say his story gets tied up in that kind of mythos where I make very clear my feelings on what that is in terms of gender and sexuality. And I think a little bit of my own, like, again, personal like experiences kind of get thrown in there too. Again, not bringing too much into it, but I totally get what you mean. For sure. I remember for me, I'm like a major like Terry Pratchett nerd specifically, and I remember reading Good Omens at a very, very dark time in my life and being like so like fully, and if you haven't read the book, but highly recommend it, but it's like an Amazon show now. It's got a ridiculous fandom now, but I have it
sitting on my bookcase. I have it on my watch list.
I currently own 4 copies of the book.
Nice.
Yeah, you know, like you do with a book,
like a mass market
But-
paperback, then the nice hardcover, and then like the really fancy Barnes and Noble edition.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I have one copy in British English, a few copies in American English. It's fine.
It's
I would have a
okay.
problem, but but where I'm going with that is I remember so with some of the characters, the stances on gender and sexuality with those, I'm like, again, I don't want to spoil the book either. Man, this is hard. But I remember seeing that and being like, oh yes, I need like more of this content. Yeah, for sure. And
when you're trying to dodge spoilers, all I see, since you're a fellow Doctor Who fan, you'll get this. All I see is the GIF that I use all the time of River Song going, spoilers.
Yeah, River Song spoilers. Yes. Yep.
Spoilers.
Yep. I know. Oh, it's so hard. But yeah, but yeah, I remember being really inspired by that too. I think for me also, it's like I remember having a conversation with another one of the voice actors about like genders at one point, and I'm like, okay, so I'm a she her who very much just, occasionally likes to, voice these dudes and dress up like a fancy gentleman. That is the full gender, all those words. I'm like, that is me. I am me, I think that's something that a lot of people need to, everybody's different and it's a whole wide spectrum, I'm sorry, I get really pumped about talking about this stuff.
I'm just enjoying listening to you talk about this stuff, because I can tell you're so passionate, and I love to see that from people who make their stuff, that they're so passionate and they're in it because I find this fun and I'm like emotionally attached to these characters I've created, and it's like a part of them.
Oh yeah, definitely. That is me. The mythos is the lore is so deep for this. I cannot even tell you.
When I first heard of your podcast, I knew instantly that Alex was going to love it, because they're very much a supernatural kind of horror fan. So that was right up their alley. And I listened to it first because usually when I listen to podcasts, I'm the opener and I'm doing all the prep in the morning. So I have loads of time to just listen to podcasts, and I think I got the podcast done in like 2 or 3 days, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I think we actually have another episode coming out this week, actually.
Ooh.
Yeah, well, this week as of when we're recording this,
which is October the 23rd. So it'll already be out by the time this episode is released.
Yes, that is true. It will already be out. And it's also, I will say, is an episode that I had a lot of fun writing, because I also, talking about inclusion, I got to throw in some, I guess, monsters, creatures, and myths and so on that don't really get spoken about as much as they should. And I'm excited for that. I'm trying to, even with this, I'm already writing another season of episodes, which everyone's already pumped about, and all the voice actors are like yelling at me to give them, and I'm like, not ready yet. But like I really want to include a lot of, I feel like with a lot of the Monster of the Week type shows that we watched, a lot of the things exist in the Western canon. But again, me growing up with a father who was an immigrant from South America and a mom who was born here in the US, I've always been like a very big fan of like exploring other cultures and things like that, because that's just how I was brought up on my own between my two parents. And I'm like bringing some stuff in from, or even like what lesser known Western stuff, bringing some stuff in from like Scandinavian culture. I have some like East Asian stuff I have planned for a second season, and it's fun because then I also get to like go and ask people. I like to, do my research pretty thoroughly. I like to go and ask people like their perspectives, like, oh yeah, just like I'm taking this from like, this culture. Does this sound like good? Because the more voices you can get in on representing all these different like myths and lore and legends is really cool. And I know that on that note, I know that Elena, we did a thing where a bunch, like a little promotional video where people were like naming things they like, monsters and myths that they wanted to see. And I remember Elena being like La Llorona, which is like big in like Spanish and Latin American culture, and I'm being like, oh, now I got to do an episode about that. Oh my gosh, because that's like, again, a connection for me. So yeah, so much stuff.
Do you have any other questions, Alex? I'm out of my questions that I had for this.
I'm still sitting over here geeking out.
Yeah, you
I've
are
been
hardcore
geeking out this
geeking
entire
out.
podcast because I have been so
Yeah.
excited and to talk to you,
Yeah.
and I'm just sitting here being quiet. And I'm sorry.
I know. I'm sorry I can't shut up. I just get so pumped when talking about this. So just like I went to what do you call New York City. I'm based in New York, and New York City just had its Comic-Con a few weeks ago. And I remember I had a cosplay, but I remember just kind of sneaking like a little sign on like the back of a hat I was wearing. It was like, ask me about my podcast. Which I did get asked about.
Okay,
sure.
Curious question. So how long ago did you actually think of like the idea for the podcast? And then like relative to when you thought of it, when did it actually become like full bodied, like, hey, we're doing this thing?
Sure. That is kind of a complicated. I'd say for me, it first started coming into shape. Actually, I always had a passion for writing. Actually, it was just funny because I ended up going to school for like engineering and theater, so writing technically was only kind of vaguely in there. But I'd say like whenever I had free time, I'd want to sit down and write. And I figured out in college, probably about second year of college, it was a really good stress reliever for me to write down like stories with like these like dumb like characters that I would make up. And like, yeah, I would write these stories on the side as like, again, like a way to help me cope with my anxiety in a lot of ways. And then I would also, way back when, I would write these scripts, and then to see how they would sound to me, I would do all of the characters. And I would just be, my roommates must have thought I was crazy because I would just sit in my bed at night with like my phone screen held up with Google Docs open and just start like talking to myself for like 2 hours at night on like a random night with like no clue, like gave them no context of what was going on. But yeah, it was. And it's come a long way because it was going to be a whole bunch of different things at one point. I started writing these stories, but I was like getting really attached to the characters. So then I was like, oh, I could probably fit this in as a hobby somewhere. So I was like, maybe I'd actually thought about doing it as a web comic at first, although my artistic skills are very, very, very crude. I mostly just do little doodles. So I kind of didn't have an artist to really like get that done with. So I was like, okay, maybe not. And then I was like, maybe I'll do like a series of short stories because I had more experience with that kind of writing. And then that didn't pan out either because I just couldn't. I got the character interactions, but I just couldn't connect them with like a style of prose that sounded right to me, if that makes sense. Like nothing really flowed to me.
Yeah.
And then I thought about it, and I thought back to, like I said, like growing up with all like the gimmicky movies and the cartoony humor and the audio. And I was like, oh, duh, this is a podcast. This is something, this is an audio drama. I can make this work. I can take something that you could totally see happening in like a Saturday morning cartoon with like weird action and like stupid sound effects, but make it all theater of the mind, because that's what I was doing anyway. When I was reading these scripts as all the characters, I was seeing what was going on in my head. So I'm like, if this is vivid enough for me to like come up with a mental picture, then it can certainly work for other people. And when I started working a few months, I got out of college a few months, and a few months later started work in doing like a scenic job, which I loved. And then that was fall 2019. Then came spring 2020. And COVID. So I basically was out of work because events and theater and all that was dead. So I kind of had that like epiphany moment where I had actually at that point in my free time had actually started shaping the really crude scripts I'd written to college into real scripts. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know if this will ever be a thing. And then I was like, well, I got all this free time. So I did it in secret for a long time. My family did not know what was happening. And eventually it what was it? Oh, I remember I told my sister what I was doing when I was auditioning voice actors, because obviously after a while, like your family calls up or comes around, is like, what are you doing? And we were on a vacation or something, and I was we were on a vacation. I was sitting in my room alone going through voices, and my sister said, what do you call it? My sister was upstairs in like in another room with my parents where we were staying. And she told me later that my parents asked her, like, where's your sister? And then she said, oh, she's working on the podcast. And my parents were like, what? I'm like, yeah, but I remember, that was probably it was pretty crazy. Like I said, like you can tell I get like in this really feverish mode when I'm talking about like my characters and my stories. And I'd say between when I decided that I was going to make this a thing, which was probably about April 2020, and when I started auditioning voice actors, which was late June, early July, in that very short period, I think I already had 2 episodes written. So I wrote about 20 episodes.
Wow.
Because I had all that time. So it was so weird. Some episodes took weeks, some took like 2 days. It was all like how whatever my brain was doing. But yeah, that was the whole thing. Then from there on, it was like met the voice actors. We all just started doing our stuff, and it was a little rocky when we started, but it's been like absolutely amazing since then. And I don't think
awesome.
I don't think like even like a bunch of us were all stuck. We were all in our, all in our 20s, like not getting any work because of COVID. And even us, the world's kind of starting to ease back now, and us all starting to go back to our respective jobs. We're still like very much into this. And I don't think any of us regret, doing it either. Like if COVID hadn't, it's kind of weird because in a way, like if COVID hadn't happened, this might not have happened. But I don't think even with all the bad stuff that's been going on, we wouldn't want to change this thing that we have because it's really special.
I totally get that. We are coming up to the close part of usually how our podcast runs for.
Sure.
So would you mind like saying all the plugs or as much as you can?
Because that's what we usually do to wrap up the end of their episode. We'll choose our Skittle, which last episode for me was you guys. And then we'll say like all of our plugs, all the places you can find us at, and just kind of wrap things up.
Okay. Sure. I luckily have this all on because we plug ourselves way too much. I definitely have that on excuse me, I feel like I had like a hiccup or something, on a nice handy little Google Doc on my phone. I will find it. So many. I have a folder just full of podcast documents.
Alex listens to you primarily on Spotify. I listen to mainly on Google Podcasts. I have seen it on Apple Podcast.
Yes,
it's pretty much just everywhere, right?
It is pretty much everywhere. Yeah, and you can we go through Castos, Heinous Investigations at what do you call it? Investigations at Castos. Let me speaking of Heinous Investigations.castos, there we go. I was like, it's not at HeinouSinvestigations.castos.com is where you can go to get our RSS feed and get links to some of our social media stuff. If you want to actually just look straight for our social media on the respective platforms, we've got, they're all different versions of Wildly Productions. We've got Wildly as in Oscar Wilde and then LY, Wildly _Productions on Instagram. TikTok is also Wildly _Productions, Tumblr, just straight Wildly Productions, Twitter, Wildly Product 1, Facebook, Wildly Productions. We even have Redbubble. We have a Redbubble site for merch that we should probably advertise more.
Ooh, nice.
Yes, it's very snazzy. They have hats now. Ooh. But we got a shop that's called Wildly Pros. That's the capital W. It's all one word. It's really weird. It's like capital W Wildly and then capital PROS, no space in between. And that's Redbubble. And then we are Wildly Pods on Reddit. If you have any like questions or recommendations or cross promotion inquiry stuff, we are always looking for it on there. I'd say, awesome. Oh, one more thing. YouTube channel is Wildly Productions. I think also speaking of the YouTube channel, we are planning a stream for Friday, October 29th, 9:30 to probably 11:30 / midnight Eastern, depending on how long it takes, but we will be doing something called Halloween Fic Fest, which is a bunch of us have foolishly written fan fiction, Fantasy Investigations fan fiction for each other. And we will be reading it all in character. And I know this episode, I'm assuming, is coming out after that, but it doesn't really matter because streams just end up staying on YouTube. So go check it out if you haven't already, because it's going to be interesting.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on board and being our first guest. I mean, I know this is probably like a big, weird shot in the dark.
Oh, no, this is like a huge freaking honor for me. You have no idea. You can tell I'm like, my anxiety is clearly in overdrive right now because I'm like so freaking hyper, but it's good. I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is so incredible. This is like, I think it's a big step for everybody, and I'm excited to have been a part of you guys's podcast adventure.